There's a strange kind of déjà vu that settles in when you watch Meghan Markle move through the public stage. It isn't a fleeting resemblance or a nostalgic echo, it's something deliberate, rehearsed, almost forensic. The posture, the guarded smile, the gentle tilt of the head under camera light. The world has seen this choreography before. Once upon a time, it belonged to Princess Diana. Now, it appears to belong to someone else entirely. From the moment Meghan stepped into the royal frame, there was an uncanny sense that she had studied not only the institution, but also the most iconic woman ever to challenge it. Princess Diana's gestures weren't just remembered, they were reproduced. When Meghan covered her mouth during interviews, when she stepped into a crowd with calculated humility, when her eyes seemed to shimmer with just the right measure of vulnerability, observers felt an echo reverberate through decades of royal history. But imitation, no matter how skilled, can never truly replicate the origin of pain. Diana's tragedy was spontaneous, organic, born of isolation and genuine heartbreak. Meghan's, critics argue, has at times felt like an arranged performance, executed with media precision and strategic timing. The difference lies not in emotion itself, but in authenticity. Diana's despair unfolded unwillingly before a hungry press. Meghan's appeared curated for it. The first signal came early. Her royal debut wasn't tentative, it was cinematic. Every outfit, every press photo, every softly spoken quote seemed to have been storyboarded. The shy gaze from under the brim of a hat, the white ensemble echoing Diana's 1987 charity visit, the carefully chosen settings, each felt less like coincidence and more like design. It was as if the ghost of Diana had been summoned, not by memory, but by marketing. Yet the world Meghan entered was nothing like the one Diana had survived. The late princess lived in an era before social media, before algorithms and outrage cycles, before a single rumor could spark millions of posts within an hour. Every picture of Diana was rare currency, every silence a provocation. The mystery around her life gave her a power she never fully understood. Meghan, conversely, walked into a digital hall of mirrors. She overshared where Diana had withheld. She explained where Diana had only endured. And somewhere between visibility and vulnerability, the spell broke. Observers began noticing patterns that didn't sit right. Each emotional revelation was followed by a new public venture. Each confession of privacy invaded was followed by another camera lens, another deal, another declaration. When she spoke of silence, it was often in a documentary. When she decried intrusion, it was during a primetime interview. This contrast wasn't lost on the audience. Prince Harry's involvement complicated everything. The boy who had walked behind his mother's coffin grew into a man haunted by flashbulbs. His anger at the press was sincere, perhaps too sincere. Meghan, arriving with her own grievances about media intrusion, fit perfectly into that old wound. Together, they shaped a narrative that blurred love with rebellion, compassion with vengeance. In public, they were a modern fairy tale couple escaping the suffocation of tradition. In private, they appeared to be drafting a new war against the very press that had built their legend. At first, the world wanted to believe them. The wedding had been dazzling, multicultural, modern, the monarchy's new face. But the glow dimmed quickly. Stories began to leak from within palace walls. Tales of friction, staff departures, whispered tears at fittings. None of it could be confirmed outright. Yet the pattern mirrored a familiar royal arc. The outsider who battles the establishment. Except this time, the script felt rehearsed. When Diana's pain surfaced, it came after years of endurance. When Meghan's story of suffering emerged, it was within months. To her detractors, it seemed as if she had skipped the slow burn evolution of sympathy and gone straight for the crown of people's princess. Yet affection cannot be inherited, and empathy cannot be demanded. Diana's appeal was accidental. Meghan's appeared orchestrated. The turning point arrived with the Oprah interview. Dimly lit garden, open emotion, pauses weighted with significance. It was a near facsimile of Diana's confessional with Martin Bashir, minus the unguarded chaos that had made Diana's words unforgettable. Meghan's tone was polished, precise. There was sorrow, yes, but there was also control. Where Diana trembled, Meghan curated. And in that precision, something vital was lost, the unpredictability of truth. Then came the contradictions. A plea for privacy paired with multi-million-pound streaming contracts. Condemnations of royal coldness followed by Netflix's dramatized reenactments of the same. A public denouncement of tabloids while anonymous sources whispered favorable lines into glossy magazines. Each action undermined the one before it. The couple's narrative, intended to evoke sympathy, began to invite scrutiny instead. Behind the glamour and grievance lay strategy. The Sussex brand was a fusion of royalty and celebrity, moralism and media craft. It thrived on visibility while denouncing exposure, a paradox that could only last so long. By the time the docu-series aired, fatigue had set in. Audiences who once leaned forward now leaned back, arms crossed. The story no longer shocked. It repeated itself. The contrast with William and Catherine became more pronounced. The Prince and Princess of Wales practiced restraint as if it were an Olympic sport. Their silences spoke volumes, their rare appearances carefully measured. Where Meghan and Harry flooded the airwaves, William and Catherine left gaps for imagination to breathe. Public perception tilted quietly back toward the traditional royals, not because they were flawless, but because they seemed exhausted by the performance of perfection. For Harry, the tragedy is almost Shakespearean. His hatred of the press, justified, understandable, became the lens through which every event was interpreted. Meghan, perhaps knowingly, positioned herself within that lens. She became the companion who understood his trauma, the ally against the system that destroyed his mother. But over time, it appeared she was also shaping that trauma into a storyline, one where both could emerge as victims and visionaries simultaneously. The result was confusion. Were they seeking healing or headlines? Public support, once a tidal wave, began to retreat. Polls shifted, coverage soured. Commentators noted how swiftly affection had turned to irritation. The couple's complaints, once moving, started to sound rehearsed. Each new grievance felt like a sequel nobody had asked for. Meanwhile, the royal institution they had denounced continued to exist, largely unchanged, its silence once again proving more strategic than any speech. In the background, Diana's legacy hovered like a ghost neither could control. Every time Meghan donned an outfit resembling one of Diana's, the comparison reignited. Each time Harry invoked his mother's memory in interviews, the emotional weight felt weaponized. What had once been sacred grief began to resemble public currency. Critics argued that the couple were commodifying memory, turning mourning into marketing. Whether fair or not, perception became reality. And yet, beneath the criticism, there remains something undeniably tragic about the whole tableau. Meghan's desire to be loved as Diana was loved may not stem from malice but from misunderstanding. Diana never sought adoration. She stumbled into it through pain and perseverance. Her connection with the public was earned one awkward appearance at a time, one tearful encounter, one silent act of compassion. Meghan, arriving in the age of instant validation, mistook visibility for affection. She learned too late that attention is not the same as empathy. Harry's arc is no less complex. In trying to defend his mother's memory, he may have become the unwitting architect of his own isolation. His mistrust of the press, though justified by history, now fuels a perpetual war that keeps the wounds open. His memoir, his interviews, his lawsuits, all seem to push him further from the quiet dignity Diana ultimately sought. The boy who once symbolized resilience now appears locked in combat with ghosts. Meanwhile, Meghan's mastery of symbolism continues to intrigue. The wardrobe choices, the subtle gestures, the mirroring of iconic poses, each new public appearance feels loaded with intention. It is as if she is performing both a role and an argument, insisting that her story deserves the same empathy once given to Diana. But empathy cannot be summoned by costume. It arises from consistency. When contradictions surface, when proclaimed privacy becomes public spectacle, the illusion fractures. Observers within media circles often note how Meghan's control over her image differs from Diana's unguarded vulnerability. Diana's most haunting moments were the ones she couldn't script. The eyes welling up during a hospital visit, The quiet glance at a child with AIDS, the laughter breaking through loneliness. All unscripted, all unforgettable. Meghan's interactions, though impeccably polished, often seem deprived of that unfiltered humanity. The spontaneity that made Diana luminous is replaced by precision that feels sterile. Over time, this precision began to resemble calculation. Public relations experts could trace the rhythm of each revelation, the timing of interviews, the alignment of charitable announcements with media storms, the perfectly coordinated releases. The strategy was visible, and that visibility stripped away mystery. Diana's power had always come from the unknown, the unspoken, the untamed emotion that hovered behind her eyes. Meghan's story, by contrast, arrived fully captioned. The deeper irony lies in how both women sought independence through exposure. Diana used the media to reclaim her voice, believing that telling her story would set her free. It both liberated and destroyed her. Meghan followed a similar path, but in an age where exposure is infinite, liberation becomes impossible. The more she spoke, the less people listened. The saturation diluted the sincerity. In seeking transparency, she lost trust. There's also the matter of timing, Diana's greatest strength. She knew when silence would sting more than words. When she did speak, the world stopped because it knew she rarely did. Meghan's constant communication, podcasts, interviews, statements, achieved the opposite effect. Her words blurred into background noise, her revelations competing with yesterday's trending outrage. The result wasn't empowerment, but exhaustion, both hers and the audience's. Even within Hollywood circles where image is currency, whispers suggest fatigue. The couple's partnerships, once heralded as groundbreaking, have faced quiet restructuring. The sheen of royal glamour faded faster than expected. Without mystery, there can be no myth, and without myth, there is no monarchy, even the self-made kind. Still, beneath the speculation, there lingers a more human sadness. Meghan's ambition, viewed charitably, was to modernize royalty, to merge compassion with candor, activism with accessibility. The tragedy is that she mistook constant exposure for transparency, and the audience she sought to win over could sense the artifice. When connection feels choreographed, it ceases to connect. For Harry, the cost is emotional as much as reputational. His grievances, once rooted in justice for his mother, have been diluted by repetition. The sincerity remains, but the delivery has grown weary. Each lawsuit, each televised complaint, stretches the empathy of even his most devoted supporters. The irony is cruel. In trying to avenge Diana's suffering, he has risked replicating it in a different form: self-inflicted isolation. As the years pass, the comparisons between Meghan and Diana have become both inevitable and unfair. One is myth, the other mortal. Yet Meghan herself invited that comparison through repetition, through deliberate aesthetic echoes that begged the public to draw parallels. What she failed to anticipate was that such parallels would also invite scrutiny. You cannot summon Diana's spirit without awakening the world's memory of what made her authentic. The collapse of public affection didn't happen overnight. It eroded gradually, each contradiction chiseling away at credibility. The couple's public image, once framed as revolutionary, began to look self-indulgent. Their grievances, once courageous, began to sound rehearsed. By the time audiences realized they had heard this story before, the narrative had exhausted itself. Meanwhile, the monarchy they sought to escape remained curiously steady. Scandal-resistant, buffered by centuries of precedent, it simply waited them out. The Windsors understand the long game: silence, patience, continuity. The very institution Meghan tried to outmaneuver through modernity survived by doing nothing. It's a lesson Diana learned too late, and Meghan perhaps never will, that in the royal ecosystem, time itself is the ultimate weapon. And so we return to the eerie déjà vu that started it all. The imitation, the parallels, the haunting resemblance, it's all there but hollow. Because what made Diana unforgettable wasn't style or soundbite or sorrow. It was sincerity. She suffered in public but never turned her suffering into strategy. Meghan, in trying to inherit Diana's light, has mistaken the spotlight for the source. History is repeating, but not as tribute, as caution. The world has moved on. Empathy, once automatic, now demands authenticity. And authenticity cannot be staged, no matter how perfect the imitation. The final irony is this. In chasing Diana's legacy, Meghan and Harry have illuminated what made it unrepeatable. Diana didn't control the narrative. The narrative consumed her. And yet from that chaos emerged genuine connection. Meghan's story, meticulously managed, lacks that chaos, that accident, that humanity. Perhaps, in the end, that is the quiet truth behind the spectacle. The love Diana earned came through endurance, not exposition. The world saw her suffer, fall, and rise again with grace. Meghan's story, though grandly told, remains unfinished, trapped between self-protection and self-promotion. The blueprint she followed was never meant to be copied. It was written in heartbreak, not ink. And that is the difference the public feels, even if they cannot articulate it. They sense the imitation, they recognize the calculation, and they recoil from the performance. Because pain cannot be rehearsed, and empathy cannot be engineered. Diana's magic lay in her imperfection. Meghan's tragedy may lie in believing perfection could reproduce it. Their media footprint has always been minimal, precise, and meticulously strategic, focused almost entirely on duty rather than drama. No sob stories, no revenge interviews, no carefully leaked gossip to shape perception. Their restraint has produced stability and, more importantly, credibility. The press doesn't chase them because there's nothing to chase. No breadcrumbs, no manufactured chaos, only a structure so tight that it becomes a shield. And that is the subtle, yet decisive difference. Princess Diana never needed to announce her suffering. It was visible in the distant glances, the forced smiles, the moments of quiet grief captured inadvertently by cameras. The world watched her endure, and in that watching, people empathized. Meghan, on the other hand, repeatedly announced her pain, laid it out in interviews, in documentaries, in public appearances. And paradoxically, the more she repeated it, the less the audience believed. The emotion didn't feel discovered. It felt delivered, like a carefully packaged scene intended to evoke a reaction. Even her early shy phase had a veneer of choreography, the hand-over-mouth gesture, the soft-spoken cadence, the subtle gaze. Each movement seemed studied, as though she had watched hours of Diana footage and tried to recreate the same effect. But it didn't endure. That carefully cultivated awkwardness was swiftly abandoned, replaced with sharp speeches, public legal battles, and calculated media leaks. The transformation wasn't nuanced. It was jarring, like someone switching accents mid-sentence. And in that abrupt pivot, a truth became clear. This was never about telling a story. This was about shaping one. In attempting to claim Diana's mantle, Meghan overlooked the essential truth. Diana's power was rooted in sincerity. That sincerity was forged through years of genuine pain, silent endurance, and the quiet spaces between public appearances, spaces where the audience could project empathy, imagine what lay beneath, and form a connection that was as unspoken as it was profound. Meghan left no blanks. She delivered bullet points, sob stories, and Netflix-ready footage. And in doing so, she triggered the paradox of modern media. The more you offer, the less people invest. Attention, unlike exposure, is earned, not granted. Then there's the more unsettling layer, manipulation. Once it becomes evident that Meghan and Harry weren't merely reacting to the media, but actively using it, everything fits. Baby announcements timed to overshadow royal events. Public statements calculated to draw sympathy. Anonymous leaks designed to feed headlines while publicly claiming victimhood. The contradictions pile up into an unmistakable pattern. It is a strategy, but one that borrows the weight of Diana's heartbreak without enduring her struggles. One that mimics her pain without acquiring her humanity. The harsh truth is simple. Authenticity cannot be faked. You can stage sorrow, script vulnerability, even rehearse sincerity, but you cannot manufacture trust. Once that evaporates, it is gone forever. And that explains the Sussexes' peculiar position today. famous but not beloved, highly visible yet strangely unadored. It stems from their approach to the very mechanism that once defined Diana's legacy: the media. Diana's story unfolded in a time when mystery and myth still carried weight. Carefully timed interviews could shape global perception. A single photograph could swing public opinion. The record couldn't be instantly dissected by Twitter, YouTube, and 1,000 independent commentators. Mystery amplified her humanity. Meghan and Harry, however, seemed to believe they could release statements, retreat briefly, and be applauded indefinitely. Sympathy, they assumed, was theirs for the taking. Media, however, is now unforgiving. It doesn't offer grace. It demands consistency. The Sussexes could not provide it. One moment they cried out for privacy. The next, they invited the world into their living rooms with documentary crews and Netflix contracts. One week, they condemned false narratives. The next, they published books filled with unverifiable claims. You cannot plead for solitude while simultaneously broadcasting intimate details. Meanwhile, William and Catherine demonstrated the stark contrast. They understood the power of restraint in an age defined by relentless exposure. They offered only what was necessary, timing appearances, statements, and events so sparingly that each moment carried weight. Their silence has become their shield, their occasional disclosures carefully curated to feel earned rather than manufactured. It is a masterclass in subtle influence, an art the Sussexes have never seemed to grasp. Then there is the public itself. Audiences, for all their fickleness, are remarkably adept at sensing manipulation. They know when they are being sold a narrative, when emotion is performed rather than lived. Diana never had to announce her title as the People's Princess. She was given it, organically, through years of quiet struggle, awkward public moments, and courageous appearances that exacted a toll unseen by cameras. Love, in her case, was earned through authenticity and endured hardship. Meghan, attempting to compress that same emotional trajectory into a rapid, 2-year sprint, misunderstood the very mechanics of public affection. You cannot reach the destination without first walking the path. What we have witnessed, therefore, is not simply a failed media strategy. It is a demonstration of the perils of treating public image as a performance, a scripted drama in which every gesture is intended to elicit applause. Real connection is inherently messy. It is inconsistent. It is earned through the unpredictable interplay of private struggle and public perception. The Sussexes, by contrast, have attempted to manufacture connection, and in doing so, have alienated the very audience they sought to captivate. Today, they inhabit a liminal space, neither fully royal nor fully Hollywood, neither pure victims nor outright villains. They occupy a realm defined by visibility without admiration, influence without trust. They wield microphones and cameras, yet their audience has dwindled. Not because the public is cruel, but because repeated performance cannot substitute for lived experience. They possessed the world's attention, an unprecedented global platform, and the sympathy that followed their departure from the monarchy. Yet they squandered it in a bid to imitate rather than innovate. In attempting to step into Diana's light, they have instead cast their own shadow. Every carefully staged gesture, every mirrored pose, every orchestrated revelation has highlighted the gap between imitation and authenticity. The public can detect it instinctively, the difference between truth lived and truth performed. Diana's light was earned through enduring the unknowable pressures of a role she neither sought nor controlled. Meghan's shadow is the product of trying to accelerate that journey, to shortcut the laborious, delicate process of earning trust and affection. And so, the tragedy becomes clear. They were handed history's attention, offered empathy forged from generations of fascination, yet attempted to appropriate a legacy they did not inherit. Diana's empathy was organic, a consequence of being observed and understood in her most vulnerable moments. Meghan's empathy is sought, packaged, and delivered. The audience senses the difference instinctively, responding not with admiration, but with skepticism. The Sussexes' media journey, unlike Diana's, is defined by contradictions. One moment they proclaim a desire for privacy. The next, they commodify it through documentaries. They rail against the press yet leak stories to it. They lament the monarchy's coldness while profiting from that same narrative. Their strategy, far from creating adoration, has eroded trust. They have learned too late that in the modern media age, transparency must be paired with authenticity. Volume cannot substitute for virtue. Performance cannot replace reality. In the end, it is not a matter of dislike or resentment. It is a matter of perception, of discernment. The public recognizes when it is being presented with a story rather than a life. They can feel when suffering is performed rather than experienced. And in the relentless age of digital exposure, the Sussexes' every move has been scrutinized, analyzed, and ultimately found wanting. Meanwhile, the monarchy endures, not because it is flawless, but because it has mastered the art of selective revelation. William and Catherine understand the quiet power of absence, of letting the audience fill in the blanks, of speaking only when it matters. Their image is controlled not through constant broadcasting, but through careful withholding, a lesson Meghan and Harry have yet to learn. It is this contrast that defines the Sussexes' current limbo. They are constantly observed, endlessly discussed, yet never fully understood or admired. In attempting to replicate Diana's light, they have revealed the essential truth of her appeal. It cannot be copied, it cannot be accelerated, it cannot be manufactured. It is earned through time, struggle, and authenticity, a currency Meghan and Harry have tried to shortcut, only to find it elusive. The final irony is stark. Diana's power emerged from the very pressures Meghan seeks to wield, the chaos she attempts to orchestrate. In chasing Diana's legacy, Meghan and Harry have not achieved it. Instead, they have illuminated the very qualities that made Diana singular: patience, sincerity, the subtlety of lived experience, and revealed how impossible it is to replicate them. Love and empathy cannot be demanded. Trust cannot be scripted. And in a world attuned to nuance, performance is no substitute for truth. The Sussexes' story, once brimming with potential for admiration, has become a cautionary tale. It is a study in the limits of media manipulation, the hazards of accelerated legacy building, and the unforgiving nature of public perception. They sought to inherit affection and emulate a crown of empathy, but discovered that the crown cannot be copied, the affection cannot be purchased, and the legacy cannot be fast-tracked. And in that shadow lies the ultimate lesson. You can chase history, imitate brilliance, and craft the perfect performance, but you cannot replicate authenticity. Diana's light remains untouchable, not because it was planned, but because it was lived. Meghan and Harry, in trying to claim it, only highlight the unbridgeable distance between imitation and reality. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals, one scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.